right. Hello and welcome, everybody. Good evening and welcome to the API Alumni Network's webcast titled Power of Humility, Connection, and Resiliency. We're excited and really happy to see such a great crowd of attendees tonight. Looking at our count, we have about 29 folks with us. My name is Mei Yi, and I'm a graduate from Oregon State University class of 2016. I'm also part of the leadership team that helped coordinate this of the OSU API Alumni Network and your host for this evening's webcast. A little context for those who don't know, the OSU API Alumni Network was recently formed to provide a way for alumni, former students, friends, and supporters of our OSU API community to stay connected, support current students in the university, and to grow our personal and professional networks. As we begin to plan more events and opportunities to connect, we're really excited and we'll be reaching out to you and encouraging you to participate. So as you all might know, May is Asian and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. And we've shared staff and faculty stories showcasing the things that make us unique and the things that unite us. As an alumni network, we wanted to continue to build and deepen connections across OSU and beyond. Tonight, we are excited to hear some personal stories that center around the power of humility, connection, and resiliency from some of our fellow Beavers. So a bit about how this evening will look. I will be welcoming each of our speakers and giving them a few minutes to share their story. At the end, we will welcome each speaker back to answer any questions that came up during the presentation. At this time, please notice the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen, which is where we're asking folks to send their questions, and then we'll be addressing them as time allows and also the time at the end that we've allocated. So let's jump right in. Our first speaker lined up today is Grant Yoshihara. And Grant Yoshihara spent nearly 40 years working professionally in the energy and utility industry. He retired in April 2018 as the Senior Vice President of Operations and Chief Engineer for Northwest Natural, a natural gas and water distribution utility serving 800,000 customers in Oregon, Washington, and Idaho. He worked for Northwest Natural for the past 27 years, starting in gas supply, and had subsequent management assignments in industrial market services, commercial business services, utility operations, marketing, and customer acquisition and customer service. Prior to joining Northwest Natural, he worked in nuclear safety engineering and fuel supply management for Portland General Electric, and subsequently develops energy efficiency and independent power generation projects with specific assignments in project management, plant operations, and fuel supply management for 2 energy efficiency startup companies. Grant continues to be actively involved in the community. He currently serves on boards and/or committees for Oregon State University's Engineering Leadership Academy and the Loma Athletic Club. He is a past board member and chair of Volunteers of America Oregon, Community Vision, American Leadership Forum of Oregon, Japan American Society of Oregon, and is one of the founders of Partners in Diversity. He has also continued his energy industry engagement and passion for customer, employee, and operational safety as a member of the Independent Safety Advisory Committees for 2 major U.S. utilities. Grant is a 2-time Beaver graduate, earning his Bachelor and Master of Science in Nuclear Engineering. Welcome, Grant, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mei Yi. Hopefully everybody can hear me. Good evening. It's really nice to have this opportunity. I understand the technology enables us to do these things under these trying times. I'm going to quickly go kind of give you some background of what I have learned and where I came from and how that translated to what I've done work-wise. So I, like just about everybody who's in America, we are all, with the exception of one group, and that's the Native Americans, we have some kind of immigration experience somewhere back along that line. For my situation, my grandparents immigrated to the United States, first basically coming out of Japan because of economic opportunity and settling in the Washington area, farming. They were peasants when they came. I didn't have any money. We're sending money back that they were earning. And over time, they established themselves. My grandparents and my parents were born here, both born in the United States. So thankfully, they were US citizens. This plays into an interesting situation during World War II. But bottom line is that whole immigration experience, starting from the ground up, really gets bonded into you. For me, probably the biggest experience, and I think how things happened to evolve for me, was because my parents were both interned or put in the Japanese American concentration camps during World War II. This is something that was extremely difficult for them to weather. But they have this resiliency, this ability to keep looking forward, keep thinking that things can get better. It was really odd because while my father and several of my aunts and uncles and my mother were all in the internment camps, we had 6 family members, extended family members, who were serving in the United States military in World War II. And frankly, I think it was that experience of that generation to go through that period of being incarcerated, then having to basically come back out of the camps when the war was over and start all over. That taught them a lot of things. The interesting thing was, yes, they had to be resilient. Yes, they had to accept the conditions, but see how they could continue to move forward. So I was born and raised in Eastern Oregon on a small farm. Probably the biggest thing that was a driver from my parents, I was going to go to college. It didn't matter where it was going to be, but I was going to go to college because education was the biggest driver. It was a driver, they missed that opportunity because of World War II. So that was the biggest driver. I ended up at Oregon State. I was actually considering 2 other universities, but I knew I was going to be into the science and engineering end because I grew up on a farm and got used to building things. So ended up at Oregon State, had a wonderful experience there, had a professor who I worked with for the 6 years I was there as an undergrad and 2 years as a grad student, who really shaped a lot of the things and made me look at things more broadly. And interestingly enough, he made me broaden my thinking and my education beyond science and engineering. He was having me take classes like history of Western civilization and that sort of stuff. Just wanting to broaden that background. So when I went up into the workplace, I always had this interest in learning. And this was driven again by my parents. All opportunity was given for us. They were going to have all us kids go to college. I have 3 siblings. So the 4 of us, between the 4 of us, we have 9 college degrees. And that was all being driven by my parents. I mean, that was a big deal. I think the other thing I want to pass on is how you learn and how to work your way into the workforce, because we are often considered, the Asians are always often considered the model minorities, right? They're stereotypes. Hardworking, they're compliant, they don't rock the boat, they do what they're told. I think you have to learn to step up and speak your mind at the appropriate time and the appropriate way. I did have a background in competitive speech and debate from high school, and that actually helped me learn how to communicate and how to present myself in different work situations that ultimately ended up giving me opportunities. The other thing that I would pass on to you, and I'm getting close to my time, I think, is that, there's a lot about how you're connected to people. There are people that you know, people that you go to school with, you grew up with, all of these elements. There's people you work with. And what a lot of people say is, well, there was this old saying, it's who you know. And I don't agree with that. Actually, I had a friend of mine that I met years and years ago from Hawaii, and he said, it's not who you know, it's who knows you. Because especially if that's that who knows you in and around the workplace, they often can tell are the ones who are going to influence decisions and opportunities for you. Or they may recruit you, like happened to me, to go to 2 different startup companies or into a natural gas company or get us different assignments. I started in engineering, basically spent my first 10, 12 years in engineering and technology. But then I went to marketing. I went to fuel management. I went to managing major industrial accounts. I then was moved into customer service, and I ended up running all the customer service functions for the natural gas company. And then also ended up getting back over and having one boss who says, I need you to go fix something. And he put me back over in charge of engineering and operations. So I think for me, a lot of that was somebody else giving me those opportunities. I went through my resume and I went through my job applications. I made one application and I had 13 different jobs during my career. That one application was right out of college. And that was already a given deal because I had done an internship. So again, I think it says that opportunities are presented to you by other people who know you, who know your weaknesses and your strengths, what you're capable of, or what you might want to learn, those sorts of things. So I think a lot of it is, and if that's the last piece of information I'll pass on, I'll turn it on back over to Mei, that if you can see those and seek those opportunities, yes, you present yourself, yes, you do your work well, all those sorts of things. When you engage with people, that's when they learn who you are. And it's the who, not what you are. And that who helps you with creating opportunities for yourself in your career. So that's about all I have for now. I know we're going to basically do a Q&A. So Mei, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Grant. I think it was very inspiring to hear about your parents and their story and how that hope has carried forward intergenerationally through education and also breaking the model minority myth by speaking up and being true to yourself. So thank you for that. And if you have any questions for Grant, please utilize the Q&A. Next up, I have the honor of introducing Victorian Winn. Victorian Winn is the Equity and Inclusion and Diversity leader implementing diversity and inclusion initiatives across the Northwest Marketplace for the Kaiser Permanente service area that includes 35 medical offices, 20 dental clinics, and 2 hospitals. She has been a practitioner of inclusion for over 16 years, with a primary focus on providing executive consultation on culture, workforce diversity, leadership development, and business strategies for 7 business resource groups. Before Kaiser Permanente, Victoria was the Associate Director with the Center for Ethics at Oregon Health and Science University, and served as the Director of Diversity Development at OSU, where she had vital responsibilities in the areas of high potential leadership development and diverse retention. She led diversity initiatives for the Asian and Pacific Cultural Center, Lonnie B. Harris Black Cultural Center, Centro Cultural Cesar Chavez, Native American Longhouse, Etihad Middle Eastern Community Center, Pride Center, Women's Center, Hattie Redmond, and Soul. Victoria is a graduate of Oregon State University, earned her bachelor's degree in health science and an interdisciplinary master's in the field of college student services administration, adult higher education, and ethnic studies. Welcome, Victoria, and the platform is yours.
You may. Good evening, everyone. I am so appreciative to have this opportunity to be with you tonight. I bleed orange, and when I was asked for this opportunity, I couldn't say no, because one, I'm a beaver, but secondly, the theme is so thought-provoking. I really struggled on what to share with you all, and do I do a personal story or do I do a professional story? I ended up thinking about, I'm just going to combine it all. So here goes. I grew up in a very traditional, conservative Vietnamese family. My parents immigrated here from the Vietnam War, and so it's very similar to what Grant was saying earlier. Education was always a key for them, and so all of us knew I was the oldest girl out of 6 kids, right? I'm number 4, and so you can imagine growing up in a household with 3 older brothers always watching you. But I was sort of the one that was always testing the parameters a little bit and pushing the conservative thought patterns of my parent, being, as we were growing up, always the first to speak up around stereotypical gender roles, and then being the first to move away from home to go to college. And of course, that only lasts a year. And then also being the first to move to the East Coast, right, after college. And so there was many firsts, and I think back and I reflect to that of there were great many firsts, and there was also great many not so great moments, right? Very failed moments, unsuccessful, and yet there's really no one for me to turn to really ask questions or advice around that. And because my parents were first generation, they've never gone to college, we immigrated here. So I really learned to kind of navigate all those challenges on my own, and to really be thinking about, well, how do I do that? And it brings me back to the topic of being humble and really practicing humility. And I realize now that a lot of those experiences, good and bad, has really taught me that it's okay to fail. And part of that is building the character around being humble and being, when I do fail, then I have to ask for help. And I have to ask for those around me to help me fix it, right? And then have the humility to really say, thank you for helping me. I appreciate that. And so going through life, I navigate that. And so the question then becomes, how do I apply that to my work? And being in healthcare and being in COVID, or coronavirus, as you all know too, really gotten me to really reflect on some of those experiences, as many of us don't even know how to navigate this, right? We're all experiencing this for the first time. This pandemic is what we've read about in our history books. Many of us never experienced it at all in our lifetime. There are others who are at least the plague and along that line, but it's the first for me and for folks in leadership in my organization. So it really forced me to really pivot and think differently, and to be humble and ask the question and say, I don't know. And how do I lead in an environment that I don't know, and all the uncertainty, right? Making plans, and then making contingency plans, and making more plans for backup plans of another backup plan in case things doesn't work out. And so really, really stopping and thinking about that. It's okay to do that, and it's okay to be asking for help, and to ask in a culturally appropriate way, and practicing cultural humility, as I would say that. And so that's how I can connect that work. And then the other component, I reflect on those experiences that I had growing up, was that the importance around connection. And when we hear connection, we think about friends, we think about people who are in our in-group, our network, our families. But I'm really reflecting, and I'm asking you to really think about outside of that network. Because although I've had challenges, I've also had experiences where I depend on my neighbors, right, to get me through some of those experiences, my coworkers, and yes, even those who I disagree with, and I may not necessarily say that they are in my in-group, I've actually learned from them. And so I really now reflect and think connections and to your community goes beyond with just in your in-group, and how other people have really shaped my work and my thinking. And that also helps me leverage the work that I currently do, because with the pandemic, this is unprecedented. We have not seen anything like this before across all industry. So this is the time for us to really leverage the ability to build community, the ability to make those connections, to reach out to other industries, specifically in my role to say, what are you doing and how are you doing this and how are you navigating this, and having our best thinking and utilizing each other as thought partners, and to really help move the work forward. And so that part that goes with the connection and the being humble and asking the question really applies to my work today, and how I've experienced that all through the different stages of my life. And then lastly, I would add, these all build on each other. They're not in isolation, and they intersect in so many parts of our lives, both personal and professionally. And resiliency is the last part I like to touch on. Going through those experiences growing up has really challenged me to really think outside of the box and have a creative way of saying, how do I take care of myself? How do I also take care of others around me? And that really adds a lens to the work that I do right now around equity, inclusion, and diversity, and what that looks like. And we know during COVID and the pandemic that it's not only self-care for ourselves, but it's self-care for others around us. And then how are we supporting each other around anxiety of the unknown, right? The stress of pivoting and changing work, and changing from an office environment to a home environment. And then for those navigating home, work is now includes not just your work, but your family, could be your children, lots of distractions. So with that, I've learned the resiliency tools to manage all of those. And one of that tool that I like to kind of share with you all and give you food for thought is practicing grace. I give myself grace because I know that I don't know everything. And I also need to be able to ask others for help and have the grace to do that. And then not only for myself, but giving grace to others, right? We're all doing this together. We don't know. We're all navigating it together. We're all trying this thing out for the first time, and give others the benefit of the doubt and grace as well, as we all try and navigate this together. So that's how I sort of tie this theme in together with my experiences growing up, and how I apply those three, around the current work that I do and into my personal life as well. So that's it for me.
Thank you so much, Victoria. I really appreciated your words on, finding grace and knowledge through both your successes and failures, and how the power of humility really unlocks our ability to connect with other people and share our collective wisdoms, to build a network of support and interdependent and intersectional solutions that ultimately help uplift all of us. And so thank you for sharing your story and experiences. All right, so I get to introduce our next speaker, Soko Eve. And so Soko Eth is a dedicated community advocate and has worked in the policy, nonprofit organizations, and legal spaces. He has developed a passion in grassroots organizing, coalition building, policy advocacy, and project management, having worked in IRCO's community development and health departments. Eth is currently the president of Cambodian American Community of Oregon, a registered 501c3 volunteer organization that has been serving the Cambodian American community in Oregon and Southwest Washington for 30 years. CACO's mission is built around uniting community, preserving culture and language, and empowering Cambodian Americans to be engaged in community. Eth also serves on the IRCO Asian Family Center Advisory Board and currently works for the Oregon Department of Revenue. Eth received his BS from Oregon State University in 2012. During his time at OSU, he was involved in the Cambodian Student Association and was elected vice president of the Associated Students from 2011 to 2012. Eth also holds a JD from Lewis and Clark Law School and is a member of Cornelius Honor Society. While in law school, Eth clerked for IRCO Immigration Legal Services and was a judicial extern for U.S. Federal Magistrate Judge Han Yuli Yim Yo. And then he clerked with the law firms of Mandras, Sinlapasai Garcia, and Matthew McLennan. Welcome, Soko. Please feel free to backtrack and let folks know the correct pronunciations of the wonderful people that you worked with. And we're excited to hear your story.
Thank you, Mei. I think you did perfectly fine. And just in the spare of time, let's keep going. But first of all, I wanted to say congratulations to anyone in the class of 2020. While I personally don't feel necessarily qualified to opine or give advice to students about life and career, considering the fact that I barely just graduated within the past decade, I'll try to keep my message as simple as possible. And if you take anything away from these 10 minutes of me speaking, I hope that you take away the idea that making mistakes is okay, that you should try to learn every day, and maintaining a positive outlook is most important. All of those are tied to today's talk about being resilient, being humble, and being connected, because life, from what I can tell, is filled with constant personal mistakes and failures, chances to try and learn and relearn, and fail and fail and fail. And honestly, the only thing that really gives you opportunity to look at life from a different perspective is to maintain that positive outlook. So make and recognize your mistakes, learn every day, and maintain a positive outlook. Those lessons, I think, were drawn from my family. My family is made up of Cambodian refugees that fled during the killing fields. And I think those lessons and life trials that they went through allow me to gain a different perspective about how life is for myself and what I want to carve out for the world around me. But I reflect back to when I was younger. Every day when I was young, my grandfather, he would turn on the radio every morning. And it was a short wave ham radio thing that would often get live broadcasts of Cambodian news. And every morning, my alarm clock would go off at 5 a.m. And here we was listening to the radio. Every morning, you would hear the same broadcast message, live from Washington, D.C. This is Radio Free Asia, and the following is in Khmer. The top of that broadcast, the message that this radio station would often bring to me would allow me to see into the world of politics and international affairs and current affairs. It was from that point on that I learned to love and develop a passion about history, reading, current affairs. policy and politics. And I struggled to find my sense of belonging in it, or struggled to find my sense of who I was in it. I grew up in a small town in Newport, Oregon, and also went back and forth between Portland. And so having not really that sense of belonging really impacted me. But that daily ritual, that grounding that my late grandfather gave to me of the news, of politics, of current events, that new ritual, that daily ritual, carried on to my life as I went to Oregon State. Mistakes. When I got to Oregon State, you would have thought that I would have gotten involved with all those things that really interested in me. Politics, student activism, and community. Reflecting back, I actually didn't. Instead, I tried my best to find a place and fit into things that I didn't know exactly if it would be the thing that I wanted to do, but I knew that if I didn't try, I wouldn't know. That was a series of mistakes that I think allowed me to learn, to fail, to move forward. And those mistakes drove me to the next part, which is connection. Through my struggles, my first few years at Oregon State, I realized really quickly that I needed to figure out where my connections were and where my passions were. It was there that I met and went and talked to my advisors. One advisor really stuck out to me, Janet Yoshihara at EOP. That struggle of passion and finding my sense of community eventually allowed me to, with her encouragement, to find a community. And that community ended up being the community that I'd have always been a part of since the beginning, the Cambodian community. The Cambodian Student Association at that time didn't exist yet, and been gone for about 10 years. And so with the help of other friends, we brought back the Cambodian Student Association. We were able to make new memories, build lasting friendships, and really go forward in building our sense of place in the Asian Pacific Islander student community. And that brings me to my second or third part, is resiliency. I struggle every day to find that continued passion and ability to continue and live with those passions. But I always reflect back to that time when I couldn't really feel that connection to community. And thankfully, from those experiences with the Cambodian Student Association, it taught me that I was really interested in things like politics, like advocacy, like policy, and like the law. Eventually, all those things were a part of the root basis of my current career and my future career right now. I think for the most part, resiliency is learning from those failures and learning that you struggle and everybody struggles. I think if we are to move forward as a collective society, you should never let the opportunity pass to help others. Resiliency is something that you should remind yourself of every day. Those connections that you have, being humble, all that is something a part of us, especially as descendants or ourselves, immigrants and refugees from Pacific Islander communities, from Asian communities. And we come from a culture and heritage of resiliency. We should live up to that humbly and connected with every way that we can, so that way we can be in service to those around us, to our local community and our global community. So recognize your mistakes, learn every day, and maintain a positive outlook. Those are the things that I think everyone should have right now, especially in a time of great global barriers and problems. You know, there are individual problems with your life, there are struggles with everything that you do every day, and recognizing that life isn't made up of clean, easy chapters. But when you bring all those different aspects of life and your community together, you're able to understand and help others. So if anything, we can move forward collectively and recognize that as long as we maintain those positive outlooks and we work with each other, then we can move forward. And so as our world is struggling with a time where leadership is often overlooked and a time where challenges for everyone in the world, we can't really afford to not live life by respecting the past and respecting your passions. We have to make ourselves resilient. We have to make ourselves and those around us connected to tackle the problems of today's world. I think those are all very connected to what academics call social determinants of health. And those are really much the building blocks of how we can really secure one's environment and safety and education and society. I think as long as we keep to those, we're able to then tackle the collective societal problems like this global pandemic that's happening right now, or like climate change, access to healthcare, education, developing infrastructure, and providing access to justice and due process and equal protection that many communities need. We must always reflect on being individuals and being connected to ourselves. So I hope that anyone that is listening really does take away that making mistakes, learning every day, and maintaining a positive outlook is what's going to collectively make us stronger, more resilient, and more humbled and connected. Thank you.
Thank you, Soko. And also thank you very much for painting and sharing such a beautiful memory of your grandfather. It felt like so nostalgic and very warm. And also for the lessons and thoughts of that success is not immediate, it's not always simple, but there are strong themes informing how we connect with each other as a community, such as reactivating the Cambodian Student Association, and how that in turn had helped Soko build a stronger passion towards their own career goals as well. And so next up, we have Alan Louie, who is also part of the Osu Api Alumni Network leadership team. And so a little bit about Alan. They graduated in 2014 from OSU's College of Business with a BS in marketing. He is currently working as a marketplace operations specialist at Nike World headquarters in Beaverton, Oregon. Some things that Alan enjoys outside of work and studies is cooking and spending time with his family. Cooking has always been a passion and a creative outlet for him, as he probably spends around 10 to 20 hours a week cooking or researching food. That startled me a little bit too. So Alan, whenever you're ready, we'd love to welcome you and hear a little bit more about your story. Hi.
How's it going, everybody? Thank you very much for this opportunity to be here today. I originally had something, really long-winded written out, and I was going to tell you a full story about who I am, where I came from, pay a little homage to my family on how I became who I am today. But, I think I wanted to talk a little bit more about recent events and how it's been affecting me. I wanted to make sure that I spent enough time making that point kind of clear. There's been a lot of stuff going on in social media. You see a lot of injustices happening, and something that actually happened at Nike. We recently got a new CEO, John Donahoe, and he held a worldwide all Nike company meeting, and a lot of it was to address the global pandemic and to address what we're doing to work against that, how we're going to stay a strong company, and where we're going to be focusing our attention and resources. And one of the remarks that he said was, we are going to be focusing a lot of our energy and resources into the Black Employees Network and the Latinx Network. And he kind of just moved along from there, which was, in my eyes, which was okay. This is what the company wants to focus on. That's great. But then we had a meeting with the Ascend Network. So I should have said this earlier, but I also serve as a co-chair for the East Asian Association with the Ascend Network at Nike. And we had a leadership team meeting, and somebody brought up, did anybody notice that he did not bring up, the Ascend Network or the Asian Americans who are, working for Nike? Why aren't we focusing resources there? And so we had a long discussion about it. Many of us were upset. Many of us didn't have an opinion or didn't know what to say. So we brought up those issues with our executive sponsor, Frank. And Frank actually brought it up straight to John Donahoe, straight emailed him. And to our surprise, he emailed Frank back the very next day, within 24 hours. And he said, hey, let's have a meeting. I will get you on my schedule for tomorrow. And so he did. Frank was very pleasantly surprised that he actually got into that meeting, had a very wonderful conversation, and was able to hash out our concerns as a community at Nike. And he did apologize. He said, it's just something that happened. I was in the moment. I don't write my speeches, or, he doesn't have it right there for him. And so he said, I just forgot. He didn't use it as an excuse. He talked it out with Frank. He says, what can I do to make it up to you? What can I do to help? And he genuinely explained his position on the subject, which was really great. Frank came back to us as a group, explained everything, and actually all of us felt really great about what had happened. We felt like we were really supported. He wanted to get to know us, and he wanted to make sure that we are taken care of and grow as a community. Part of the reason I use this story is that, John, he showed an extremely high level of humility. He did feel bad and he wanted to make it up to us. And just because he's a CEO doesn't mean that he doesn't have enough time for us. He actually pushed back a couple of his meetings to speak with Frank. And the other reason that I wanted to use this story is because in general, I find that having connections and having a sense of resiliency kind of go hand in hand in this case. I find a lot of my energy, my positivity comes from working with this group of individuals at Nike, to help spread awareness and spread this knowledge that we are learning throughout, anybody who needs support at Nike. So having that connection and having that resilient, it allows me to be resilient in the face of this pandemic now. So a couple of the things that, I would leave and have questions in your minds are, where do you get your energy from? And what is your why? Why do you do what you do? For me, I get my energy from my community, from the people around me. If I'm having a bad day, I love to connect with my friends. I love to do things like this and hopefully inspire people to, get out there and have a good life, have fun. And the reason I do it is because, it's primarily because of my parents. I grew up in a restaurant. I worked my entire life there. One of the things that really had a strong impact on me was my father would always hire college students because he knew what it was like to struggle, be a struggling college student and need work. And, my dad was always in the business of helping people. And so I think, that's one of the reasons that I want to do what I do and make sure that I can help as many people as possible. But that's my story for today. You're on mute.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Alan. It was really great to hear about your experience at work, and also how you found a lot of power and resiliency, not only within yourself and your experiences, but also with your connection with friends and colleagues. And I think you had used the term energy, which I really appreciate as well. And so thank you for those. And friendly reminder, if anything resonates with you, or if you have any questions that you'd like to ask any of our panelists, please utilize the Q&A function. We'd love to hear some thoughts from folks and get to ask some fun questions to our panelists as well. All right, so next up, we are lucky to be joined by our last panelist tonight, who is in the last stretch of spring term. They are a current student, and their name is Diana Winn. Diana is a current Oregon State student who is the leadership liaison at the Asian Pacific Cultural Center and has been involved with diversity and cultural engagement at OSU for over 3 years. She is also the co-host of Making Waves, a podcast collaboration between KBVR-FM and the APCC. This last year, Making Waves podcast was one of 5 national finalists in Best Podcast category, recognized by the College Media Association. And so, hi Diana, welcome, and we're excited to hear your story.
Hi everybody, I'm Diana. So like May mentioned, I'm technically not an alumni yet, but I'm set to graduate in like 2 weeks. So that's super crazy, and because of that, I've been having a lot of thinky thoughts, honestly. So as a little girl, I never really dreamt of going to college. I dreamt more about like abstract things, nothing that anybody could touch. I dreamt about sleeping in clouds and dissolving right through them and having the grass below suddenly reach up to catch me. These were my goals and aspirations, as nonsensical as they were, but I mostly just aspired to participate in and enjoy the world's magic. I didn't really dream of anything that was real or anything that my parents hoped that I would be dreaming about, which I assumed was probably just having multiple degrees and a really high-paying job. In all honesty, I couldn't even picture what college really was, even through my senior year of high school, as embarrassing as that sounds. I sent in the apps, I wrote the essays, and I took exams. These are the things that I feel like my parents could touch and understand. And it honestly became the only things I felt like I could share with them. Sometimes I want to describe to them about how I think. I think that a beautiful sheet of pollen suspended in a floating shiftlessness is the most charming thing in spring. And I think about how sometimes the air feels so thick in summer that I could stir it with a spoon. I want my parents to know these things, and this is how I think. But I feel like, in all honesty, most of the time they just want to hear that I've done this or that, and that I've been accepted into school, and that I've chosen a major that would have lots of jobs available for me at the end of it all, and most importantly, a job that would make me lots and lots of money. College honestly felt like it just happened, and like I wasn't really experiencing or enjoying much for a while. Like nothing really felt triumphant. They all felt like duties I had to fulfill. And honestly, nothing was more soul-crushing when I felt like I couldn't do it or that I didn't want to do it. Sometimes staring at microbes and human anatomy would bring me to tears because I just really struggled, but also it reminded me of all the stories that I felt like just wouldn't translate to my parents. Could I tell them anything besides that I was doing well? Doing quote unquote what was right felt like the only way I was allowed to speak to them. This was our line of communication, and I've honestly been hanging on by a thread. To this day, it honestly still feels this way. I can't lie and give someone advice on how our relationship has healed and all of this has vanished, or that even I have healed from this. I still close my eyes and I see the same clouds and grass I dreamt about when I was little. And sometimes I want so desperately to pull it all out of my brain and to show my parents. I want to make some exclamation like, this is me. This has been me all along. I'm not only a checklist of doing this or that. I often ask myself, is it right for me to keep complying? I don't know. I still don't really. But my only answer all this time has been imagining the boats in the refugee camps and all the things that disregarded the dreams of so many people, including my parents, who didn't have the time and privilege of closing their eyes and dreaming about clouds and grass. My only answer has been that maybe this is what I have to do. And this is how all that pain somehow makes sense. This is how I make their journey make sense to them. But sometimes I wonder if those same boats in refugee camps and things have also somehow disregarded my own dreams. Today, I'm often left wondering if there's some way to honor and accept that pain in history without carrying it on inside of me for the rest of my life. I think I want to hold on to it, but I want to hold on to it differently. And through all this, I think I have become one of the most resilient people that I know. I want to be able to acknowledge and accept that I am made from a history of pain and molded from pain and perhaps birthed from someone who still hasn't healed from hers. But I think I want this pain to let me go and to stop controlling everything I do and think of. I want to place it differently. It's like allowing myself to finally imagine that that grass that reaches up to catch me every time is much like how it's so much easier to comply and be safe than to let myself speak, even if maybe my thoughts and ideas won't ever really make sense to my parents. Maybe it's okay to own myself and what I want. I ask myself, how can I do this? And I honestly still couldn't really tell you. There's a lot of things that I don't know. I just know that I still keep going and that I am constantly figuring it out, even if it hurts to. I think that's what resiliency and power means to me. I can only tell you that I keep going, even if I am confused. And sometimes that is more powerful than I let it be known. I'm really proud to be Asian American, even if I feel like this identity sometimes hurts, or that it causes so many things to get lost in translation. I will never really know or truly experience my parents' pain and what an American dream really means to them. But perhaps their dream for me to comply isn't really a cage or an ultimatum, but more so just that push I needed to learn how to want to be my own. So I would like to really thank Alan for this opportunity, and also my sister and Jet. I see y'all in the participants. And I would also like to thank all the APCC staff for being here. So sorry if that was cheesy, but I'm just really thankful for the support.
Thank you, Diana, and thank you for sharing your wonderful story. It was very poetic and powerful. A lot of it I also resonated with me, both in terms of senses and my own experience. And I really appreciate you sharing that it's okay and it's possible to carry the both and all of the tensions and experiences that we carry through our own lives and also intergenerationally through our parents. And so thank you so much for sharing, and thank you for being here. And so next up, we have our Q&A segment. Thank you to folks that have submitted some questions. And thank you to the wonderful team that is working behind the scenes to make this webcast a reality. And so I'm going to invite all of our speakers to come online and join us as we transition to some questions from the audience. So turn on all your cameras. Hi. Hello, welcome back. All right. And so let's check in on some questions. So this isn't directed at anybody, but the question is, what is the biggest lesson you learned your first year post-graduation? And so for those of us panelists who have graduated, is there anybody who'd like to speak first around this? Alan.
Yeah, I'll share real quick. I don't really think it came after my first year though, because I was so eager to get out into the job market and start working and learn something. But I think I would say that the biggest lesson I learned from my first job, which I was at for 3 years, was that I really should have spent a little more time researching the company itself, finding out what they stood for, who they were, how they work as a company, and see if I fit there or not. Because in the end, I left because I just didn't agree with some of their values and the way that they ran the company. So, it felt a little bit like it was a waste of time. But I'm here now. I'm happy, and I found a good place.
Yeah, lessons are learned through our failures as well, as many of our panelists have shared. Anyone else would like to answer this question?
You know, it's hard for me to think back that far since I graduated so long ago. But I think it was really those first sets of job assignments that I had where the biggest driver for me was I wanted to learn more. I wanted to learn more than just what I'd been trained at, you know, from the engineering standpoint, the science standpoint. I wanted to learn more. I wanted to learn more about the business, about the industry. And I think that was probably the biggest driver for me is that I ended up eventually getting an MBA. But the reality is it was all driven by my interest. So I want to learn, why does that work that way? You know, or, you know, what is the position of the company today and what does it need to be, you know, 2 years from now, those kinds of things. So I think for me, it was just, you know, driven by this learning initiative that came from my parents. It came from growing up in a rural town where the connected community that we had, a Japanese American community in Eastern Oregon, was really tight. And they supported each other. And what was also interesting is that you got a lot of support from the original people who settled there too. And so it was this interesting dynamic to be growing up in that area post World War II, where you had a lot of support in your community. And all that was driven, education, number one, was the big thing. But yeah, I think it was really about validating for me that I didn't know enough. I needed to learn more.
Most definitely. And that's like the power of humility, of recognizing that we don't hold all that knowledge. Victoria, is there anything you'd like to build off of and answer?
Yes, I love all the responses so far. What I would add is that don't have expectations that you're going to go into your job and you know exactly what you're doing. Because if you do, you're setting yourself up to fail. Because any job, even as a veteran, moving from different position to different positions, what you're hired to do on paper, the role and the description is very different than actually doing the work, right? And another layer added to that is your team and the team's dynamic, the culture of the organization, that all changes. So you're basically starting from square one, almost like you're graduating out of college again. And so I would say, again, give yourself grace and don't have high expectations and don't be so hard on yourself, because every position requires a learning curve and a transition. And no matter how long you've been in the industry or as a new fresh graduate from college. And so give yourself that grace and be able to ask for help. And more importantly, the importance of having network and your connection. My first job outside upon graduation was luckily near OSU doing EID work at LBCC, but I felt like there was so much more that I need help with, and there's so much more that I could learn from others. And that's the importance of building those connections while you're in college and going after your mentors and reaching out to them and asking for, hey, how do you do this? And so that has been really important in every single position I've been in, understanding the importance of building those relationships and building those connections. And I have leveraged that everywhere I've gone. And if the takeaway from anything is that wherever you go, don't burn your bridges, even if you have a horrible job. And if you didn't like the organization, never burn your bridges, because you can always leverage those connections somehow and it will come around.
Yeah, most definitely. I would say there's also a lot of power and kindness and grace, like you've shared. Soko, you have anything else to add?
I think, everyone has touched base on some important aspects of your first job out of college. But for me, I always was struggling with the idea of moving forward into a career path in the law. And that required a whole set of steps that, made me have to really consider, did I need to go into the law? Do I want to be something adjacent to it? And I think a lot of it might resonate with some new graduates who are thinking about going to graduate school too, especially a professional school that requires so much more planning, because you don't just apply to a professional school. You apply to the professional school, you take admissions tests again, and then you take licensing tests, and all of it is so much work. And on top of that, building, like Victoria and Grant have said, trying to learn, and also leveraging your network. Leveraging your network was really important to me, because I didn't know any Asian attorneys, and I didn't know anyone who were from my background who practiced or were in policy spaces. So a lot of it was kind of just going blind into it and seeing what's around, and learning that, oh, this isn't really something that resonates with me. It goes back to that feeling that I have when I reflect back to whether or not it is my passion, and whether or not it is something that resonates with me, like listening to the radio with my grandpa. Is it something that brings me, I guess, like Marie Kondo, like sparks me joy, or is it something that can really set the building blocks to a good career? And knowing that a good career right now might not be the good career that you want 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, and towards retirement that you might have. So always keep learning and use your network. It can't be stated enough that your network and your mentors are very important.
Thank you. And Diana, we have a modified question. Do you have any advice that you would share with your peers who have a couple more years left until graduation?
I don't know if I'm warranted to give advice, because I feel like I know nothing, but I don't know. I guess just be authentic to yourself and your own experiences, and work on validating what you want. I don't know.
Most definitely. And I want to affirm, like, everybody here has like their own experiences, and hence through failures and successes have generated wisdom, and we all carry that with us and are able to share and build strength with other people by connecting and sharing and relaying that. And so thank you so much. We do have a question kind of following up from some of the responses. Reagan asks, how do you maintain grace and or not burn bridges while maintaining your core values and authentic self? Good question. Would folks, is there anyone itching to answer that?
I can answer that, because I sort of brought up the burn bridges component of it. I would say I would never be not authentic in the interactions that you have. So you have to be who you are, right? And you have to be comfortable in your own self and your action. And so and the question talks about burning bridges while maintaining your core values and authentic self. And I believe if you are leading from an authentic space and you are bringing your core value to work, and your work should be a place where you feel like you could do that, right? That's where the need is for equity, inclusion, diversity. If you don't have a space where you can feel safe to be yourself, then I would suggest maybe questioning if that is the right organization for you. But again, there's never a perfect day every day at any organization, no matter how great they are, right? But if you bring your authentic self to work all the time, you should be able to say, this is my core value, this is how I behave every day. And like I said earlier in my example, there are connections that I've made with people that don't always agree with me, we don't always see eye to eye, and it's easier to say, I'm done with you, we don't see eye to eye. And as a young professional, I used to do that. I have to admit that, right? It's like, oh my gosh. But as I grow in my professional journey, I realize that we don't always see eye to eye, but if I remove my bias lens of who they are and how they are, there are times that they're bringing up some pretty valid points that I may be missing. And so I'll say, oh yes, okay, well, we don't agree on certain things, but in that point we'll agree. And then how do we work together and how we build partnership? And if we can't do that, then I wouldn't say burn bridges, but I would say be professional about that. You look for opportunities not to engage with that individual. I know that there are crazy people sometimes in an organization, and you can't rationalize that. But I think that's where you need to really use your professional judgment and still exert professional courtesy. And you have to work in an environment where it's not just you and that person, it's you, that person, and everyone else. And you have to role model that.
Thank you. We have time for maybe 1 or 2 more responses from our panelists. Do other folks have thoughts around bringing your authentic self and also maintaining connection and bridges with folks?
I'll add, I think Victoria brings up some really great points too. For the most part, I feel like when you find yourself in that type of space, a mentor or many mentors is very helpful. Someone who is more seasoned in your field, or someone who's more seasoned in your unit or your department or your team, who can kind of guide you. They don't even have to be a part of your team or your the space that you work in, but having someone who can kind of guide you along the way to not necessarily burning those bridges, but setting your points up or being able to understand it from that other perspective is really important. And they can also bring a humbling sense or sensibility to why you're feeling the way that you feel. Oftentimes the mentors and career spaces that I've been in have really been able to guide me into looking at it in a holistic perspective. So I don't necessarily feel like you can be a hot-blooded young professional. You can be that person who can kind of be more mindful about your next steps, so that way it doesn't hinder your career, your passion, and your ability to learn, but it gives you a chance to learn more.
Thank you. And thank you to all of our panelists who were able to share their story today. I would like to invite all of you to turn your cameras off as we transition to our closing. And so I wanted to share a couple of things before we ended our webcast. There are many other ways to stay connected to OSU and our greater alumni community. Given the unprecedented challenge of the last couple of months, the OSU Alumni Association has worked feverishly to launch a new digital engagement hub called Beaver Lodge, as you can see on your screen. We encourage you to write this down and or visit it right now at osualum.com/Beaver Lodge. So a little bit about it. The Beaver Lodge is your one-stop shop to find out about other virtual events. Like tomorrow, we have tools and tips for the online job search through Career Connections Hub, or Beavers Care, which is an initiative to support students as they face life-altering world of COVID-19. All of this and more can be found on Beaver Lodge, again at osualum.com/Beaver Lodge. Another thing we wanted to share is that we also encourage you to share your story, which is the My OSU Story, by visiting osualum.com/mystory. To let us know what you've accomplished and how OSU has had a positive influence on your life. So please also feel free to share about fellow Oregon Staters who make you proud to be a member of Beaver Nation. Is another way to capture our stories and engage all of us who have attended tonight. All right, and so in conclusion, I just want to say thank you to all of you that are here. Thank you to our wonderful speakers today and for sharing your stories. And to our panelists, please check your mail for a token of appreciation for your time and your wisdoms today. Thank you to all of our attendees for spending this evening with us. We would love to know how we did, and so for everyone attending today, we'll be sharing out a follow-up email that has a survey to help us, to inform us around how we did and also what things that we could think about moving forward. And remember to check out the resources that we just shared to share your story and Beaver Lodge. And be on the lookout for more opportunities coming from us and Oregon State University Alumni Association. So thank you all, and please have a great evening. Take care.